Then manager James Brock told them to get off his private property, tossed cleaning chemicals inside the pool in an effort to get the Negroes to leave.
I want to talk about how fascists get rid of the things that they don't want anybody to see.
Today, trouble under a noon sun. Negroes and white rabbis marched to a segregated hotel, were met by the manager with these results.
Now let us have prayer at this place. Let us have prayer for the manager of this place.
You're not having any prayer here.
Also.
You're not having any prayer here.
A new survey finds Minneapolis and St. Paul among the worst places for Black Americans to call home.
The racial inequity in this state is horrific.
When we think about wealth inequality in the United States today, that's directly attributable to problems associated with housing and denial of housing. The inability of African Americans to acquire wealth in the same way that other groups were able to, by virtue of having access to affordable housing, is one of the problems that impact those communities of color today.
Of course, in the news now are all the books they're banning. They're not burning them. They're not that stupid. That would be too much of a viral moment. They're just banning them, making it illegal to have them in the library. How is that different?
About 75% of white families own the homes that they occupy. About 25% of black families own the homes that they occupy. It's actually the largest, in terms of percentage, gap in the country.
The major impediment to civil rights for African Americans' economic opportunity are these racially restrictive covenants, private contracts between individuals that allow them to dictate to whom they'll sell their property.
God bless you. You know, private property. You go too. While all this was going on, a grand jury was meeting, trying to resolve the crisis.
But this goes back to a long tradition. I grew up in Amarillo, Texas. And let me tell you, all across Amarillo, there are swimming pools. Beautiful public swimming pools, almost in every park. I used to think it was kind of bizarre that they had signs up that said you couldn't skateboard in any of those pools, even though none of them had water. Why do they even have these pools here? I was told it was because they can't afford lifeguards. That's not the reason. See, a long time ago, the last little southern round of banning shit, some goddamn Yankee judge said they had to integrate their pools. That it wasn't right for some black kid to not get to use the public pool when all the white kids do.
Covenants exist across the country. In Minneapolis, the covenants were first put in 1910. At that point, developers could start buying up large sections of farmland that adjoin the city.
When they start selling off the individual lots, that's really when the racial covenant is kind of injected into the property record.
Racial covenants tells you who can or cannot live, lease, even occupy certain spaces. 100% of these covenants are aimed at African Americans.
And the reason why is because it killed a black kid. Because he couldn't swim in the pool. So they went to court. And it was ruled that all the pools in all the nation had to allow black people. So every damn public pool here in Texas was drained immediately. Austin still has one. It's called Barton Springs. But only because they can't stop the natural flow of water.
To get off his private property, tossed cleaning chemicals inside the pool in an effort to get the Negroes to leave. policemen jumped in, and the beginning of the end was at hand. While the arrests were being made, the grand jury was about to bring in its recommendation. It asked that Dr. King remove his influence from the community for 30 days, that demonstrations cease for the same period. And then a biracial committee would take over the problem. It's doubtful whether the Negro leadership will accept this. Whites talk of a vigilante committee.
The FHA, they made color-coded maps of all the largest cities in the United States, and they broke cities down into 4 different areas. Red is considered hazardous, that's the worst. Yellow is considered definitely declining. Blue is considered still desirable, and green is considered the best. So areas that were predominantly African American or majority minority, or really in a lot of cases, even if there's a few non-white people there, that's often enough to be redlined. The FHA refused to give an area a green-lined designation. Again, this is the best designation that they'll offer unless, and I'm quoting again, restrictive covenants are already in place. That line's from the FHA underwriting manual.
In a lot of ways, the practice of redlining, which didn't start until the 1930s, institutionalized and spread racial covenants all over the country because suddenly developers got sanction, they got direction from the federal government saying, this is best practices.
All the ones in Austin were drained too. Go to any Texas town, find yourself a park, right in the middle of it will be a drained swimming pool. Go back a little farther, redlining.
This very persistent myth that northern cities never had formal segregation. The South had Jim Crow, and look at those signs. Well, racial covenants did the work of Jim Crow in the North, all over the North.
People talk about how all these black folks need to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. You mean just like we did? Because I was allowed a mortgage. Black people weren't allowed a mortgage because some guy drew on a map that if your house was inside that map, you couldn't get a mortgage. They drew those lines around black neighborhoods. Greatest production of wealth for American families in the 20th century was void for black people. Because by God, and they're trying to do it again with books. God forbid you write a book that talks about redlining. I'll be damned if you're gonna write a book that talks about how they closed down all the pools just to make sure that little Negra babies couldn't swim. I'll be damned if anybody ever finds out the truth. Because it makes people in Texas look like scum-sucking pieces of shit. People in Florida and all across the South are doing it again. Now it's books. Hell, they already took the mortgages. Clearly, those aren't available for anybody anymore. They took all the fucking public pools. And now they're gonna take our fucking libraries? Fuck that! This is bullshit. Stand up! Register to vote! Spread the word, share this video. Please, like and subscribe. But get this shit gone. Republicans are fascists. And they're trying to bring that shit back.
And I want everyone with this map to imagine themselves in this landscape of privilege and disenfranchisement.
I'm Zachariah, Lone Star Liberal. Y'all take it easy. Vote.